Hello, hello. Welcome back to the P2P Soapbox Season 3. I am your host and P2P BFF, Marcy Maxwell. I trust all of you have enjoyed a nice summer break. You've been binging all of our Season 1 and Season 2 episodes and are no doubt gearing up for a great fall event season. We have a fantastic podcast season in store for you to keep you informed and inspired on all things P2P over the coming months, and today's episode is no exception. As peer-to-peer leaders, we spend considerable amount of time and effort planning our events, building resources, crafting the perfect communications, all aimed at inspiring our constituents to fundraise even their first dollar. Our systems and staffing structures are designed to support mass participation. But if we're lucky, every once in a while, we receive that exciting phone call or email from an individual dedicated supporter who has their own ambitious fundraising goals, who are seeking to go above and beyond for our causes. And what do we do when this opportunity breaks us out of our regularly scheduled strategy? If we handle these lightning in a bottle moments with care, they can offer really profound opportunities for stewardship, for storytelling, and mission building. And I am so honored to be joined by one such extraordinary fundraising team. I am happy to welcome Scott and Katy Freitag, who were the recipients of our 2024 Cash, Sweat, and Tears Award, presented at the 2024 Peer-to-Peer Professional Forum Conference in February. If you were with us in Philadelphia, I have no doubt you will recall their story. With Scott cycling and Katy following in an RV, the couple recently completed an 11,000-mile bike journey around the perimeter of the United States, raising funds for several organizations, including Zero Prostate Cancer. For more than 25 years, Zero Prostate Cancer has helped people and families impacted by prostate cancer. Zero is the primary destination for all impacted by the disease to convene, get support and education, and come together as one united voice, create a better future for the prostate cancer community. Which is also why our conversation wouldn't be complete today without their staff partner, Tracy Cameron, Zero's Upper Midwest Chapter Director. So during our conversation today, Scott and Katy will share stories from the road, including how they stayed motivated, their proven best practices for fundraising, and what they sought out in a charity partner. Because, spoiler alert, Scott and Katy did not know the Zero team before they hatched their big, grand fundraising plan. And Tracy will discuss how the Zero team reacted when they first got that phone call, how they supported the yearlong efforts, and how they were able to leverage Scott and Katy's story to advance their mission as a whole. So let's jump right into what I know is an inspiring conversation with Scott and Katy Freitag and Zero Prostate Cancer's Tracy Cameron. Scott, Katy, Tracy, welcome to the P2P Soapbox. We are so happy to have you with us to kick off Season 3.
Thank you. It's so good to be here.
Thank you so much.
Now, we have been talking about this episode for a while. You were joining us back in February as the recipient of our 2024 Cash, Sweat, and Tears Award. And Scott and Katy, you were still in the middle of your 11,000 plus mile journey around the U.S. So I know I shared a little bit about your background, but I'd love to hear it from the two of you. Can you tell us all a little bit about your personal journey? What led you to this recent, fundraising challenge and, literally trip around the United States?
Well, for me, it started years ago, about 40 years ago, a little bit less, about 35 years ago. I was working at the main post office in Minneapolis. And, I was a permanent employee, and they had hired, we always hired Christmas help, and we hired an older gentleman, at least I thought he was at the time. probably my age now then, and his name was Scott. So we hit it off. Very interesting guy. And he was leaving in the spring to sail around the world. And I was biking a lot at the time, and the light bulb went off my head. And it's like, hey, I'd like to, bike around all the perimeter states, because I've heard of a lot of people biking across, but not many or nobody I had heard of biking the perimeter states. So that kind of stayed with me for years. And then, 35 years. And then when I was going through chemo treatments, I was, probably 55, 56, I think at the time. I got the phone call that no parent ever wants to get. I lost my son, Benny, to suicide. And we later found out that he had schizophrenia. But, so I spent a lot of time then in that last couple weeks of chemo treatments, thinking and praying. And I decided I wanted to do something with my life, what was left, to make a difference and to honor not just my life, but my son Benny's life as well. And to shine a light on these two causes that had so profoundly impacted my life, schizophrenia and prostate cancer. So I turned to Katy and I carried it around with me for about a week, and I finally said, if I'm going to do this, I gotta share it with somebody. So told Katy I wanted to do it. This is what I wanted to do, and she looked at me like I was crazy.
Of course.
For a moment, and then she said, "Hey, let's do it." And so we spent 2 years planning the trip. I had to retire to do it. The planning was pretty intense, and frankly, I didn't do a lot of it. I did some, but Katie's the planner in the family, so she was busy planning, and then we left in June 26th of last year, and just rode back in for the final ride-in on June 15th of this year. So that's kind of the background of it.
So, Katy, when Scott turns to you in the middle of going through his own chemo treatments and dealing with his own grief and says, I want to ride around the country, what went through your mind?
Well, I will say that I did think he was crazy. I looked at him and, he was laying on the couch with no hair and looking very ill and sick and a lot of fatigue. But I saw great determination in his eyes. And so I thought, we have to do it. But before we even get to that point, by way of background, Scott was 53. We were newly married, just a few months into marriage, when he had a PSA test done for the very first time, which is a very simple blood test that reflected that he had a very high PSA. Further testing, including a biopsy, confirmed that he had aggressive prostate cancer, which, no one ever wants to get that knowledge and the word that you have aggressive prostate cancer. He's gone on from that point to have a radical prostatectomy, which did not get all of the cancer. He had to then have 2 months of radiation, go on Lupron, which is hormone deprivation therapy. That took care of the cancer for a period of time. It pushed back on it until it came back again aggressively. And PET scans showed that he had multiple bone and lymph node metastasis. That's what led up to going through the chemotherapy. When he also went back on hormone therapy, which the hormone deprivation therapy takes away the testosterone, which feeds prostate cancer. And he still is on that to this day. So I'm looking at him going through chemotherapy and knowing that he's on the hormone deprivation therapy that also causes, fatigue by taking away testosterone. And I'm thinking, you want to do what? But I could see he was very determined, and it was very important to him because of the causes, and how meaningful those causes were. So that started an overwhelming process of planning. I had some previous experience doing do-it-yourself fundraisers And so I came into this with some experience with it, but I looked at the magnitude of it and I knew that this was going to be immense, not just from the standpoint of figuring out how we could be away from our home for a year, but also from the fundraising perspective. So the first step that I did from a planning perspective was took care of everything and made a lot of lists about how do we be gone from our house for a year. And I literally looked at a kind of a lazy Susan of all the different topics that I had to get through, from taking care of the house so we didn't have pipes freeze in the winter, to taking care of mail, to what was I going to do with putting my law firm online so I could work on the road and pay for us, to lowering our overhead, doing things like selling our car. We did a lot just to be able to do the trip. And once I felt like we had that under control enough that I could see we could do it, then I started the fundraising planning for the trip. And that's where the biggest gift was getting to work with Tracy at Zero Prostate Cancer. I actually, at that point in time, we had not worked with any prostate cancer entities. And so I researched and looked at a bunch of them, and I felt like Zero was a really good fit with their mission and their function to be the entity that we wanted to support with our fundraising efforts. So we set up monthly calls by Zoom, where Tracy supported us all the way through the planning of the whole fundraising side of things.
So Tracy, let's bring you in on the conversation. So briefly, can you just tell us about what your role is, and what was that first conversation like with Scott and Katy about this epic adventure that they wanted to do and raise money for your organization?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am the Upper Midwest Chapter Director here at Zero Prostate Cancer. So my role with the organization is to help all of our constituents, our fundraisers, and anything really that happens in the Upper Midwest. I cover Illinois, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. So, of course, Katy and Scott being from Minnesota, I got connected to them when they first called our office and saying, hey, we want to do this crazy thing and bike around the border of the United States. So that first conversation was simply amazing, really. Katy called wanting to talk to somebody about what their big overall goal was to do and to plan. And, of course, when you hear somebody like that who wants to do this, the first thing you do is you get really excited when you have somebody who's new to your organization and wants to start fundraising, and especially on this kind of magnitude level, right? Because you never know what to expect and the obstacles that are going to, happen along the way. And then you hang up the phone and you sit back for a minute and you're like, oh my gosh, how are they going to do this? Like, this is such a big mission and this is such a big thing to give up your life for 1 year and go around the border. You don't realize how alone you can be out on the road. I know just traveling down to visit my kids in college for 5 hours in a car ride, you start listening to things on the radio and start, all these things pop in your head. And, to do this for 355 days was going to be like, oh my gosh, I'm glad that they had each other, but most of their time was spent alone. Scott's biking alone. Katy's driving this huge RV alone, with the exceptions of her dogs. I'm sure she got really, close to her dogs when she was gone. But, you do everything from the standpoint of just being there 100% for them. There was not a day over those 355 days, well, maybe a couple, but Katy and I were on the phone with each other every day, whether or not we were talking, whether or not it was just a simple text to say, hey, how's it going today? Are you both doing all right? And just really just listening to what they both needed on this trip and whatever I could do to support them along the way. It was a huge undertaking. We knew what was going to happen going into it, whether, it was setting up a website on our end and to connect to their website. If there was stuff that they needed along the way, we would try to provide it to them or have them meet up with somebody along the ways, but that we knew we could get something to them if needed. But really, I was just here in case they needed it and support them and try to help them if anything happened. Scott, along his journey, there were he got into an accident on his bike. There were things that just kind of happened along the way that could have happened to anybody when they were out on their bike. And just knowing that Katy had somebody to call just to kind of vent to when things like that when Scott got hurt, or, if they came into a roadblock and they just needed to get it off their chest, we were here for it. And they got to meet a lot of us along the way when they hit our other areas, which really provided a bigger support for them throughout this journey, I think. At least I hope.
It did. Very much so. That was one of the gifts. I mean, one of the pleasures of working with Zero, and we worked with two different charities, and really there was a big difference between the level of support that we received. We did have daily contact. We had extraordinary administrative support, and then we had personal support, which was so much more than what I expected I was ever going to get. And Tracy's right. The people along the way that we met, not just Zero staff, but Zero champions, as we call them, other people that are fundraising or doing advocacy for Zero, were really special. And it's what made the journey extraordinarily special. So that was something beyond what I even expected. I got so much support from Zero. I was just really grateful for it. I knew I could reach out about anything along the way. And this was a major undertaking on so many different levels, on not just the fundraising piece, but also the awareness piece, because our goal was to reach at least one person about the mission every single day. And oftentimes we were meeting with Rotary groups, bike groups, community groups, church groups, just in terms of the actual function of doing the outreach. On the backside, I was also, from a functional standpoint, doing daily social media, interviewing Scott before and after, talking about where we were at, with the journey, but also pushing wherever we were at on the fundraising and on the awareness. We were also doing media press releases. I was doing emails to various contacts. So I was doing every kind of social media there was, not just Facebook, but Instagram and TikTok. And we put things on YouTube and doing reels. And so there was quite a lot of daily effort involved to make sure that I was moving the journey forward from our end while Scott was out biking.
God, you didn't know you'd be a TikTok star with all this.
Yeah.
I knew.
From my perspective, in particular, meeting the Zero champions along the way, and I look at them as brothers in arms. It was great. It's kind of some of these guys I met along the way will be lifelong friends. Great people. And just made it really special, for sure.
Yeah.
When you do a do-it-yourself fundraiser, you may not be thinking about the fact that you're going to connect with other people that are also fundraising for the entity. Because in contrast, when you do like a run walk or some kind of a team event where you're meeting others, we were out there on our own and alone. And so Tracy was right about the isolation for both of us. So by taking that extra step as an entity and connecting us with other people that were also doing things for the organization, I think that it really multiplied our efforts and became something really special for us. We even did a joint fundraiser with one of the champions when we were out in Maine, and we've definitely made a lifelong friend there.
Yeah. One of the things that you mentioned, Marcy, about, when we first got introduced to him, Katy had a list of other nonprofits that were related to prostate cancer. And she was just making calls one after another to set up these meetings to figure out which prostate cancer organization that she kind of felt would fit their need on what they were doing. And there were some key aspects that I believe that she was looking for. She wanted somebody who, one, provides support to prostate cancer patients. 2, provides a large educational and awareness to prostate cancer patients. And the third would be to advocate for prostate cancer patients, which is something that we are very, very strong at and make that a part of our mission to do. And I think during that initial phone call, Katie's like, well, I'm crossing off the rest of these on my list. You guys have got everything that I'm looking for and more. And that was it. And we were hooked and we were together. And that was the end of her search. We were very excited, and knew what we had to do ahead of time, to get going with them. And we did a whole year of planning to get them to where they could get started. So that was a really special first meeting.
Well, and I think it's such a great, again, takeaway for people listening at home, right? Or on the go or on their bike, that, I have often had a kind of a love-hate relationship with the term do-it-yourself fundraising, because I think it indicates a level of isolation or a lack of support that isn't always accurate, right? I think sometimes people hear that and they think it's all on me. I'm not going to get any help. Nobody else is doing this. When in actuality, it's almost more you're just doing it your way. You're just choosing kind of your own path to take. It doesn't mean you're alone. It doesn't mean you won't have support. You're just kind of opting to do this alternate idea. And so I don't know what the right term is, but I think that's such a great, I love hearing, when I think about stories from the road, like I love hearing about the fact that you not only connected with Tracy so regularly, but connecting with other Zero supporters all over the country, I think is such a great way to tell your story, to build community. So let's talk a little bit about the fundraising, right? So you mentioned social media, you mentioned email. What did you find that worked best, Scott and Katy? Was it your emotional messages? Was it telling the story of what you were physically doing that day? What worked best for you?
Well, I think that that's my area of that I will respond to, because Scott did some fundraising. He actually had business cards where you could scan a QR code and had the website he could hand out along the way. Because I know I'm more of an extrovert, Scott's more of an introvert. And if he's huffing and puffing away on the bike and is taking a break, to stop for a moment, the odds of him getting out his full story are slim. So I wanted to make it easy for him along the way as he met people, whether it would be on a ferry where he was crossing the water or a gas station for a break, to be able to tell his story. So he did some of the fundraising that way. And he also was the one that presented his very powerful story. And I would say the most important thing that I have ever learned from fundraising is that you need to effectively communicate your story. And when people hear your story, then they are moved to contribute. So what worked the best was any time and any way that we could get Scott's story out. And that meant, all forms of social media, getting the story out. That certainly raised a lot of money. Sending emails to people where I wrote a letter that Scott reviewed telling his story. And then the personal contact of talking to people along the way. We did various talks, but we also did some fundraisers with people that I knew that were willing to set up the fundraising, where Scott would share his story and then we would follow up and talk with them. All of those methods raised quite a lot of money. We did have a significant amount of media, starting with various newspaper and TV in different parts of the country. That, I would say, raised more awareness than funds. We did get a small amount of funds from the various media, but not a huge amount. More, we used the media to send out a new blog. I did a blog weekly, or send out a new email or do a new social media post to say, hey, did you see this media? And then sometimes new people would actually watch whatever the coverage was or read what the coverage was, and then pay attention to what I had already tried to tell them 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7 times. Because normally, it's very rare you ask someone the first time and they give you money. Usually you have to
100%
times before they contribute.
I always joke with I have 2 sisters, and every time I fundraise, one of them will be the absolute first person to donate, and the other one, it will be the night before whatever I'm doing, and she'll be like, "Oh my gosh, send me that link again," even though I've asked her 20 times. And so, yeah, I agree. You got to tell that story a lot in a lot of different ways to remind people of what's going on.
Some people like the video, version. I mean, even now, people that have known about the story from the beginning and were at the kickoff didn't, donate until the eve of the conclusion or even after seeing the ESPN coverage. It was like, oh, yeah, that's right. They've been doing this for 1 year.
It's significant donation as well. And for me, I tell them a story. We told the story at our first kickoff, and my brother had donated a match, $100,000 match, and that kind of kicked it off. And I think that was very helpful to get it kind of rolling a little bit. And then on the ferry rides, every ferry ride I took, I think I took 6 total. I met somebody and told my story and handed out a card. And I had one couple that donated on the spot. She went on the website and donated right on the spot. So I think that's very true, getting the story out, and powerful story. And people really respond to that.
So Tracy, obviously stories like this don't come around every day, right? How has this helped Zero to talk about your mission?
Oh my gosh. I don't know how it hasn't helped us talk about prostate cancer and its mission. 1 in 8 men will be impacted by prostate cancer, with, a patient passing away every 15 minutes. During Scott's 355-day ride, we lost 34,000 men to this disease. And what Scott was able to do was bring more awareness to a disease that a lot of people don't talk about. Women are very vocal. We talk until we can't talk anymore. We share what's going on with ourselves, our health, our lives. And Scott's agreeing. I can see him shaking his head.
If y'all can see us right now, Scott and Katy are making a face at each other. He's looking at her like, "You're right. You never stop talking."
It's usually, right? It's usually the wife or the girlfriend or the significant other that's kind of pushing them out the door to go to the doctor and get tested. As women, we grew up during our high school years, during our college years. We knew that at a certain age, we need to start doing self-exams and start testing ourselves. Men aren't always taught those things. Or if they are, they're just really not paying attention. It's just kind of taking a class and then passing the grade and never thinking about it again until you're older. And so men don't go to the doctor to get tested. And really, the initial test for prostate cancer is just a simple blood test. And with Scott going out and doing what he did and raising awareness, more men will be getting tested. He had this huge banner made that he would take with him to these Rotary clubs, or any talk that he did actually, that said, "I pledge to get tested." And people were coming up in droves to sign it and pledging to go get tested for prostate cancer. And that's what our mission is. It's to raise awareness to this disease for these men who can go and get tested, who can get an early diagnosis. Because prostate cancer, when caught early enough, is a very treatable disease. Men can go and live long lives and pass away from something other than their prostate cancer. But when you don't go and get tested early, when you don't go with that age requirement that is set and those standards, more men are finding out later on that their disease is a lot more aggressive when it's being caught. So, and it's attacking their bodies in a different way than what should be happening had they gotten that tested early. So, Scott going out and doing what he's done has helped us to share and to shed light on what early detection means, what prostate cancer is, and how we can combat it in a better and more productive way, so that more men can live their lives, especially somebody like Scott. Scott, of course, he's been an endurance person his entire life, but the medication that Scott's on has been known to cause extreme fatigue. It's one of those medicines that they kind of start going through what way women go through with hot flashes and, all those other things that come with losing testosterone. And Scott's been able to combat it and continue to go out on this journey and ride it. And I think it shows other men that even though you've been given this diagnosis of prostate cancer or aggressive prostate cancer, you can choose to live your life with prostate cancer instead of letting prostate cancer control the rest of your life. And what Scott going out and doing this has really made that impact. We've done our best at Zero. At least I know I have, my colleagues have too, when Scott was out writing and posting on social media and all those, before he took off on his trips, we were just sharing away on our social medias as well, because we were so proud of the fact that he was out there doing what he was doing, battling the disease that he's battling, knowing the impact that he could make. And to see the end results and what he was able to do was just so inspiring. And when you listen to his story, when you listen to him talk, it just circles it all back together. He's been an avid supporter of what we've done. We've been an avid supporter of what he's done. And I think just the combination of them both is just spreading more awareness to a disease so that no other person is going to go through what he has been having to go through.
Well, that's one of the things I always think is so interesting or inspiring about a lot of peer-to-peer fundraising is, especially when it's coming from a caregiver or someone living with the disease, is this parallel, right? This parallel between your fundraising journey, your diagnosis, and now in an endurance situation, your physical journey, right? Like the ups and downs, the highs and lows, the good days, the bad days. What kind of parallels maybe can y'all draw, Scott and Katy, between your journey around the country as well as your journey, with this disease?
That's been very inspiring to me. I was the endurance athlete in the family. He actually was more of a short sprint kind of person. So I got a kick out of the fact that he was going to be biking, hours on end, day after day after day after day, for someone that was much more of a sprinter. But where Scott has been the endurance athlete is in the cancer journey and the philosophies that he has brought to it. He has this extraordinary gift for steadiness and calmness that he brings to our relationship and brings to the journey. He focuses on staying present in the moment. He did that on the bike when he was riding. He didn't get ahead of himself, like when he was climbing up the side of Mount Washington, and he had to do 5 hours of climbing straight uphill. He focused on being present in the moment and not getting ahead of himself. Another theme that I saw him really exhibit through the cancer journey as well as through the fundraising and through the whole bike trip is not focusing on those things that are out of your control, only focusing on those things in your control. He had to deal with horrible weather. As a spouse, watching him go out in 29 degrees with a 35-mile-an-hour headwind, or rain day after day after day where we didn't even have the right clothes to put on him because we didn't have a way to get dry clothes, or the grapple, which I learned is a form of snow when we were in the Northern Cascades. All of those things, he just focused on biking and going forward. And he did the same thing and he has in the cancer journey. We have our next Mayo visit coming up here next week. And we went back to Mayo quarterly for tests and treatment along the course of this journey. And each time, I start thinking, oh boy, the visit's coming up that next. It's visits. And he's like, Katy, whatever happens will be, that's out of our control. Let's focus on what's in our control. And he's really, really good about that. And then the final one I would say that in both journeys I've seen that's really impressive to me and inspires me is he does not let fear dictate his choices. I was terrified prior to this trip on how on earth we were going to do this trip. And, I was the one that had high anxiety and overwhelm about how we were going to possibly manage it all. And he was steady as you can go and steady as you go. And of course, I was worried about him biking each day that he went out into the terrain, on a freeway where there's 85 miles per hour or going down the side of the mountain when there was grapple and ice, or on a shoulder where there was no shoulder. All of those things were scary. But I watched Scott after he took a headfirst crash into a guardrail. And had to have 7 stitches, had a minor concussion, but the hospital checked him out and said, yeah, you can ride tomorrow if you want to. You're just not going to feel good. I was scared, but he said he's not going to let fear dictate his choices. And in spite of that, he got back on that bike and he biked the next day. And he does that with cancer too. I mean, in the beginning of this cancer diagnosis, when we first found out it was stage 4, he went for his dream job, as postmaster in Park Rapids. And doing this trip was following a dream. He is not letting fear dictate his choices. And those are the things that, I draw a parallel between both, between what he's doing in the cancer journey and what he does very much in leading his life and how he led the bike journey.
I would say Scott has taught that lesson to us all, actually. She's not lying about the rain. I mean, we would have Scott fly in for things, halfway during the trip. And when he came in, the rain continued to follow him wherever he went. But in addition to that, he would go in for his 3-month appointments at Mayo. They would stop wherever they were at. He'd fly in for his treatments. You would hear, the PSA went up just a little bit, Tracy, or they found a spot on his clavicle this time. We're going to do some radiation. And when those conversations first started, my conversation back to them when they would share that with me is, listen, guys, I know that you're doing this. I don't want you to feel like you're letting us down. If we need to stop, we need to stop. I don't want your health is more important to me. It's more important to our organization. I don't want you to feel like you got to keep going. And Scott was like, there's no way I'm stopping. I am not afraid of this. I'm going to continue my mission to do this. As much as I was fearful for him, because, when you become close with someone, you never want to hear those answers. But Scott was determined. And at some point I just said, okay, I'm whatever. I'm lifting my hands. I'm going to go with whatever Scott's doing. And he knows himself and he is not living in fear. And I can't live in fear, hoping that he's making the best decisions for himself. And here we are. He did it. And he did it regardless of what his outcomes were going to be or still going to be, because he wanted to prove that he could do this for himself. And I think it's taught us all a lesson that we need to just kind of sit back and just let Jesus take the wheel sometimes and continue to follow in our dreams and in our hopes and know that in the end, things are going to be okay, regardless of what happens along the way. And so I stopped asking if he was ready to stop, because I knew the answer was always going to be no. And I'm very thankful for him that he was able to continue to do what he was doing.
I'll just kind of wrap up with 1 or 2 more questions. We've got all our listeners are people like Tracy, right? This is what they do all day long. And we all dream of getting that phone call of somebody saying, I want to do this epic fundraising effort in support of your mission. What advice would you have for those professionals who are listening on how they can support fundraisers like you that are looking to go? I mean, this is beyond above and beyond.
Well, I can say that I've had a lot of fundraising experience. And so I knew what I was looking for. And I wanted a responsive entity. The first thing to do is return my phone call promptly, which they did. Tracy did immediately. I didn't have to call 3 or 4 times to say this is something I wanted to do. The other thing that the entity did, which was fabulous, is they said, how can we help you? And setting up those monthly meetings. Sometimes I didn't even need for them to do anything that month. It helped me be accountable to stay on my schedule of everything that I needed to do to set things up. And they were always asking. Tracy was always asking, and the organization was asking, how can we help you? How can we be supportive? And when I would ask for something, if it was something they could do, they would do it immediately. I was really grateful for that. They set up a website. We set up our own milesformoney.org website. And we needed to set up our own entity because we did have the 2 charities, that we were working with. And so we wanted to put the information for both charities within the website. One very critical and special thing that Zero did was they set up, a personalized website so that we can track donations. And I always believe it's critical that you thank someone for a donation. And if I don't know that someone's donated, it's very hard for me to thank someone. And so setting that personalized link up is huge. And I really appreciated that. The other thing they did was they helped with media. When we were going into different cities, if we didn't have contacts, they would give us ideas and lists of media that we could contact along the way. That was super helpful too. I mean, pretty much whenever I asked, all the way to, hey, Tracy, do you have a finish line arch that we can use for the final ride-in? And Tracy's like, yes, I will get you a finish.
Of course we do.
Yeah. And she came and she was there. That's another thing is presence. We always felt supported from the very first kickoff where Sean came in to be there and be at the kickoff to the final ride-in where Tracy was there. And they also were very good about giving us, zero awards too. And that was nice. We didn't go into this expecting, we didn't even know there was such a thing as any kind of zero awards, frankly. But having recognition is always nice. And having them thank you for your efforts is always nice. And they were very, very good about that too. And so I could literally go into all the ways not to be versus how to be. But I think the more positive way is just to say, do things like Zero did it because we felt very supportive and very grateful that that was the entity that we chose to work with.
Just great communication and actually becoming friends along the way. And you feel like you got a friend there, that's supporting you. And it's a great feeling for sure.
Tracy, what have you learned through this experience?
Oh my gosh, they've taught me so much. Realizing that what they were doing was a very personal mission. It wasn't just about Zero. As, they did have another organization that they were fundraising for. And I wanted them to feel that we could support them through helping them with whatever I could do from our end to do it, knowing that they had another organization and it wasn't always about us. There's another side to this story, and it was Scott's relationship with his son and being very mindful of that throughout this journey. It was never about us as a Zero organization. It's always been about Scott and Katy and about their mission to do what they were doing. And I think being mindful of that and knowing and listening to what they needed, even if they weren't telling you what they needed, to be able to be heard. It could be something just simple in passing, but knowing that I was there to be able to make those connections. I never wanted to share just the prostate cancer side of this story. And so, when we were talking with media, even when I was talking to the other, my other coworkers or other staff members or other constituents, it was always referring them back to his milesformoney.org website versus coming back to the zerocancer.org website, because it was bigger than just his prostate cancer. It was bigger than just Benny. And it was the combination of the two sides that were so important to both of them. And because of that, I think that's the reason why our relationship worked as well as it did. It was never about one versus the other. It was about them both and how we could just together bring his mission to the forefront and not just our mission to the forefront. So I think that was very helpful, and just to be there for them along the way. It's as fundraisers, we do a lot. We have a lot of people on our side. Also knowing too that these donors that were coming in and donating to our organization were not our donors. These are Scott and Katy's donors, and these are a lot of third-party donors. And knowing that fine line when to reach out to a third-party donor and not to reach out to a third-party donor, and trying to, I've made some really great connections through Scott and Katy, but there's always been an ask to do that. I would never, it's not protocol to just reach out to some of those third-party donors and saying, hey, by the way, I know them. Scott and Katy have always made those introductions, and it's always been when the timing was right to make those introductions. And so just staying in your lane and understanding what the bigger end goal is. I don't care if they were donating $5 or donating the $250,000 that Katy and Scott have done for us. Anything that came in for them that benefited us was always a good thing. And just being there, just be there for your donors. That's all you can do.
We always did feel respected, huge. Everybody wants to feel heard, and we really did feel heard and appreciated. If I were to summarize it, I would say respected, heard, and appreciated. It's the way that you want to feel when you're working for someone.
Well, I am so appreciative and grateful for not only to Tracy for introducing us to Scott and Katy and having you join us at our past conference, and to recognize your ongoing efforts, your accomplishments as our Cash, Sweat, and Tears Award winner. So in closing, I know we kind of mentioned it, where if people are listening and they're inspired and they want to support, whether it's Zero itself or specifically Scott, so your fundraising efforts, where can we send people, Tracy?
I would, if you're looking to support Scott and Katy, it's definitely going through their milesformoney.org website. Regardless of the organization you choose, they have 2 separate links on their website that could take you to their schizophrenia fundraiser that they're doing, or to our Zero website. If you're looking just to support Zero Cancer, it's zerocancer.org. And we appreciate any support and help to bring our mission to life, to help save those 1 in 8 men who will be diagnosed with prostate cancer.
We will share both of those links in our show notes. Scott, Katy, Tracy, thank you so much for joining us today and for being vulnerable and sharing your story, your experience. Scott and Katy, I know you literally just got back. You commented about the fact that you had to put your mail on hold and you just came home to all a year's worth of mail and all the Christmas cards that includes. So I thank you for joining us on the podcast today and sharing your story, and look forward to kind of seeing what's next.
We just thank you so much for allowing us to be on today, and also for the Cash, Sweat, and Tears Award. I don't know if we emphasized enough how really appreciative we were of that award and the ability to talk to your wonderful organization. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and we, like Katy had said earlier, we didn't do this to get the awards, but it's definitely helps you, drive you to keep going forward, and much appreciated. And we can't thank you enough, for sure.
Well, we are glad if we can be a small part of motivation to help you continue what you've got. Thank y'all so much for joining us today.